Hey, okay, I think we're live. Hi, everyone. Thank you again for attending the Tenbound Revenue Alignment Conference. I want to make this as interactive as possible, so please be sure to drop any questions that you might have in the Q&A section. If you have any comments, feel free to drop your comments in the chat section. And to kick things off, please drop in, where you're from. That would be great. Maybe your state, your country. We have four distinguished guests on the panel who are all representing senior leadership and representing marketing, sales dev, um, customer success as well. And we can't leave customer success out. So all the four core areas of revenue alignment we have covered here with senior leadership. And to go down the panel here, first we have Mark Kilens, who's the CMO at Airmeet. He's going to be representing marketing for us here in this discussion. Zach Thompson, Director of Sales Development at ZoomInfo, representing sales dev, of course. Charlie T, VP of Sales at LeadIQ. And last but definitely not least, Chelsea Madden, VP of Sales and Customer Success at SalesIntel. My name is Derrick Williams. I'm your moderator. Now, the purpose of the discussion is to dig into how companies can build a strategy to convert leads to customers. Specifically, the overarching question here is, how do you really drive revenue alignment? So thank you, everyone, for being on the panel. Appreciate you being here, making the time, and all those that are guest attendees. Let's start by getting everyone's view on this. I'll just open it up to all of our panelists. One quick question: where do we start with solving revenue alignment? Who wants to take that first?
I can dive in here really quickly. I think to solve for revenue alignment, I think that the most important thing is you have to go and look at the customer journey, and you have to understand like where you're trying to start with a customer coming into your pipeline, and how ultimately you want them to go through your sales process and ultimately through your CS function, and give them the very best experience possible. So I think you really have to go and look at and align your organization accordingly. I think that's where I would start with. I think if you start there, everything else kind of falls into place. So I have some notifications in the background.
It's okay.
Yeah. And to build off of that, Charlie, I mean, my point of view is it actually starts with the who. So like, who are you trying to sign up as a customer and then retain as a customer? A lot of people refer to that as ideal customer profiles now, definitely different than buyer personas. So to really do that, and something we've just recently done in Airmeet, we did it at Drift as well, is we actually work very closely with our finance team. So you really have to like kind of understand your TAM, addressable market. But really, once you kind of know that, you have to hone in on what it's typically referred to as your serviceable addressable market, and then even the obtainable market. So if you haven't done like one of those exercises recently, or if you've never done one, I definitely recommend looking at that. And that's looking more at like the fit of the business you're trying to acquire and less about the buyers. And then from there, you can kind of just do some simple calculations around like your average contract value, your current win rates, your current ACV, and then like, where you see that maybe changing or how that's changing based off your product roadmap and strategy. So I really feel like a lot of people don't take sometimes the time to do that. And honestly, like just a lesson learned at Drift, that's what like a great private equity firm does. Drift was acquired by Vista for over $1 billion. And like, well, that's one of the first things they really made sure we were very clear on. So it's actually a really interesting like PE strategy. And like, to me, not enough like early stage companies, but even late stage companies kind of do that exercise and do it across not just marketing and sales, but like finance, product, CS.
So Mark, I totally agree with you. I think data analysis, and I'm a big SWOT analysis person, making sure that you totally understand where you are in the marketplace. And the thing that I think is key is that in your departments, you all have to be speaking the same language, right? You all have to believe the same things and be marching the same beat of the drum or rowing in the canoe the same way, whatever your analogy is. But that has to happen. So that communication and that strategy needs to be a workshop with multiple departments and not just a singular revenue department. Like to your point, finance, product needs to be included in that conversation, right? Because you have to you have to develop a product that supports the people that you care about, right? HR, the types of people that you hire that are going to be your brand, like all of those components need to come to the table. It's not just revenue.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of people are agreeing with the three of us right now, Chelsea. So that's great. That's great. Yeah, I'll add one more point. I think what you need to do is focus on, and we'll talk more about this as we get into the questions. I know Derrick is just like you said, Chelsea, like the explicit ways you define different things, like just the definitions. So like you say, speak the same language. Like right now we're going through a deep exercise across the whole business to make sure that we're all speaking the same language, because that's how you build the right dashboards. That's how you analyze the right dashboards. That's how you understand, the strategy together. So if you actually don't understand, just the simple stuff, like what a lead is versus an SQL, a sales qualified lead, or, even just simple things like how do we define win rate versus close rate and make sure we're like 100% aligned on that. Like stuff can go sideways pretty quick.
Yeah, I think language internally, it makes things smoother, less bristly, right? The moment that somebody in the marketing department classifies an MQL differently than somebody in the sales department, you get a thorn, right? Immediately, right? And that creates a divide in that culture. So making sure that there's that alignment is totally important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know that some organizations go to quite a degree to make sure they're on the same page, speaking the same language with, defining that in and really documenting all of those things in sort of a library. I think, Mark, you mentioned something along those lines when we spoke before. That seems like an extensive exercise, but it sounds like it would definitely be materially important and pay off in the long run. I think it probably goes to help onboarding with people as well and getting them up to speed faster too. Cool. Well, we've heard some very important factors here. There's a burning question that we want to get to when we talk about revenue alignment, and that's the relationship between marketing and sales specifically. Now, we know we're looking at 4 organizations here, generally speaking, but when we think about the traditional model, Dulany was just talking about this in his opening statements of how we would structure an organization historically with sales and marketing on 2 sides of the pendulum, and now we're trying to bring everybody together. Do we see tension still, or should just call it out? Is there a war that exists today between marketing and sales? Charlie, Mark, I'd be keen on understanding what your perspectives are on that.
Yeah, Mark, I'll go first. There certainly shouldn't be. I think there can sometimes be friction, healthy friction between the two. I think for Mark and I, there's going to be more of a war because he is a Patriots fan, I just discovered, and they are going to lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers next week. But no, I think there shouldn't be. There should be professional accountability between both organizations. But I think the first thing I've always tried to do is build a personal relationship with the leaders first, and then get aligned on what we're all going to solve for together collectively. And that even starts with compensation as well. So everyone's marching to the points prior about metrics. We're all marching to the same metrics. And I think if those are all in alignment and agreeing on what the mission is, in scaling the organization and focusing on not necessarily just top of the funnel. I've worked with folks in the past where that was their number one metric that they worked off of, instead of what is sales accepted, and then to the points prior of what the definition is of sales accepted. And then that's where the tension can come in, and it's healthy tension where both are holding each other to SLAs and to accountability to go and achieve what their side is out to go and do, but together collectively going to go scale the organization.
What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, it starts with respect. Like you said, you got to build a relationship with each person. So I joined Airmeet 5 months ago, and that was my first thing that I wanted to do is just build relationships and earn the respect, and always assume positive intent. That's something super important. I think you have to do as a leader, but when you're trying to create that alignment. And then to me, there's a couple pillars that are points of friction when it comes to sales marketing alignment, but then even for Chelsea, CS, customer success. One is the one you mentioned, Charlie, 100%. The other one is pricing and packaging. And I don't think it's talked enough about when it comes to aligning teams, because if you all, and I would love to know people's reactions to this. If you agree, let me know let us know in the chat or throw some emojis out. But pricing and packaging is ultimately going to dictate so much of how well the teams execute. And depending on who is the DRI, both the person, the team, the organization in a company that is owning that, and how well they do at working together to evolve, update that pricing and packaging. At the end of the day, that's what drives revenue, right? I mean, yes, messaging is important, lead follow-up is important, all these things are important, but how you actually sell what you're selling through the ways in which you communicate its value and how it's different, and how it's different than your competitors, and how you enable your teams to do that. And do they believe in that stuff? Like, I would love to actually hear from like Zach and Chelsea and Charlie, you on this. Like, yeah, pricing and packaging to me is like a thing that most teams don't like double click on enough. And they only do it when like there's something like really an issue. But like, you know, from the get-go, like we're right now focused on always reevaluating our pricing and packaging. At HubSpot, one of the best things we ever did was we actually hired someone who just focused kind of on that and the strategy of the go-to-market. His name is Brad Coffey. He did that for many, many years, became the chief strategy officer. And he was one of those people that really brought together all the teams around pricing and packaging, different than a chief operating officer. So I'll leave it to everyone else to respond. But as you can tell, folks, I think I'm super passionate about like this one in particular.
Right. Zach, we haven't heard from you yet, and I'm keen to understand your perspective, you know, being that you sit between marketing and sales in a proverbial way, I guess. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so it's interesting in some orgs, right? Sales development rolls into marketing. In some orgs, it rolls into sales. Maybe in some companies, it even rolls into other places. But the way that we think about it, at least at ZoomInfo, is like we're all one go-to-market team. So marketing and sales have the same problems. Marketing and sales have the same goals and the same outcomes they're chasing. So to a lot of the points made before, right, being on the same page around what are we actually chasing down? What are we trying to accomplish? And then understanding each team's role in that and what specific things they're responsible for driving. But ultimately, at the end of the day, like if marketing is not doing well, like that is a sales problem just as much as it's a marketing problem. If sales isn't converting on leads marketing is sending over, that is just as much a sales problem as it is a marketing problem. So making sure that we are talking about, you know, what are the things that we care about the most, and to what extent are we willing to experiment with certain things around SLAs. This is where pricing and packaging comes in as well, right? To what extent are we willing to tinker with our pricing and packaging and how we're positioning that even? And then also having a sort of a conflict resolution plan, just knowing that there's going to be tension here and understanding like what are the values that we have that we're going to use to prioritize, number one, which problems we solve, but even more important than that is like how we go about solving them, and sort of so that we can all anticipate what that outcome is going to be.
And to double click on that, where does, you know, when you talk about problem resolution, where does the communication, you know, we fall into silos, we fall into personality conflicts, we fall into, you know, different areas that make it hard to team well and to align. You know, on paper, a lot of this sounds easy to do, but how do you overcome the, you know, posturing for positions and the things that we see where people have conflicting perspectives or priorities, or, you know, in relation to their roles, right? We know compensation is one way to bring that together. We have KPIs, short and long-term avenues, but who takes the charge on facilitating the dialogue and really, you know, stewarding teamwork and getting folks to play well in the sandbox?
One thing I think that is super critical, and we all hire for people that we consider to be high performers, but I think that secondarily, that is almost equally as important, is to hire for people that are teammates that will play well with others in the sandbox. I think that can't be overestimated, in my opinion. I think that if someone is, it's very challenging to conquer that with someone that's very hard-headed and hyper-focused about their own silo. That can be extremely destructive. So I know that's kind of where you're going with the question, how to solve for that. I think you almost have to solve for that before they enter into the organization. Or, in my opinion, I think there has to be such other strong leadership to press that out of them, to be more focused on, again, going back to my earlier point about the mission and the customer journey. What are we trying to solve for here as a business? And making sure, even through our sales process, what are the outcomes we're trying to provide to our customers through the sales process to make Chelsea's job easier when we hand off a customer to them, that they know exactly what we're going to hold ourselves accountable as a business to. And if everyone's marching to that sheet of music, I think it's a winner chicken dinner.
Thank you, Charlie. All right, let's move on.
Yeah, hire for character, train for skill. Right,
Yep.
That's like my all-time number one hiring rule. Like you know, we just brought on 2 new folks as business development folks at Airmeet, and you know, we really, especially in those roles, you really look at their values, their personalities, their willingness to learn, their curiosity, like intrinsic motivation, right? Like, how are they motivated within themselves? And I think, for sales, this is especially true, but even for marketing, right? I'm looking for people that have deep passion for the thing they're going to be marketing. And of course, like the expertise that they're going to, be focused on within the marketing team. But like at the end of the day, like I view marketing as a sales function, because like marketing at the end of the day for B2B, like you're trying to sell, right? And so like, I think that's the other lens. As a marketing leader, you need to show to your team and explain to your team and have a philosophy around like marketing is as much sales as it is marketing. And being able to show people that like we need to join sales calls, listen to customer calls, show them how to action that data, fund a voice of the customer role or team within marketing, make sure you're really focused on sales enablement with your team. I think a lot of these actions and also just how you communicate it to your market team are critically important. So that marketing leader and the other marketing leaders on your team have got to, own that with you and really be in like lockstep with like the communication internally, this idea of internal marketing to both the marketing team, the sales team, and other teams. So the whole company knows that like we're in it together. And I'll just say one last thing on this. We do a Monday marketing minute update that I share with the entire company via Slack. It goes out at 9:30 a.m. every Monday. It's brand, pipeline, and team. And it's heavily focused on sales and marketing with some product stuff. But like the marketing minute updates, I've gotten the most amount of positive feedback since the first week I implemented that. And it gets everyone to understand what's marketing's doing, how is it helping sales, what are the numbers, where are we, what can you expect? It's just, and that's something we did at Drift as well. So I highly recommend you do something like that too.
Great call out, Mark.
It's the transparency, right? Everybody wants that. It breaks down the siloed communication and aligns everybody on the same language, marching to the same beat. It's a great concept.
And the report card's out there every Monday then. So everyone knows exactly how we're doing. It's transparent. I love that, Mark.
Derrick, can I talk a little bit about pricing strategy?
Yeah, please. I know that came up earlier, and that's something we challenged the audience with. Let's bring that up.
Yeah, I think that's something that's crucial to revenue alignment. More and more you focus on valuation of organizations, and NRR is a big leading factor. And oftentimes pricing strategy is developed on the new biz side. What can help get us closed business, as opposed to actually thinking conceptually, how do we grow the business? How do we package and how do we negotiate and how do we discount so that we can grow and develop those customers, right? So it's really important. I think somebody asked the question. It's really important that CS has a seat at that table whenever you're discussing the pricing and the product packaging. If they're not, your CS team should be very vocal and raising their hand to be a part of those conversations, or you're cutting your nose off beside your face.
Great point.
I mean, I can like that is like a plus 1,000 on that, because at the end of the day, what's like probably like top one, if not top two, most important business metrics for a SaaS business these days: net dollar retention, right? So like that's the lens, right? Like, yeah, you got to focus on like, gross margin and, all the other things that go into pricing and packaging and, whatever. But like, there's so much talk about like now, like not overselling up front. Right. And I saw this both good and bad in two past organizations. I'm always in the camp of like, use the under promise, over deliver philosophy when it comes to pricing and packaging, right? Give them what they need to solve their problems, to deliver value, but have enough room and opportunity, right? To your point, Chelsea, grow that relationship. And if you could have like 110% net dollar retention versus like, 150, 170, 200% net dollar retention, you always go for the latter thing every single day. But again, that requires the sales team to be aligned with that. That requires everyone to be aligned with that. So you're spot on.
Next question for Chelsea and Zach. What is the role of revenue operations in developing alignment, whether it's a revenue operations person or a team? What's their role in making sure that we get this aligned well?
Yeah, I'll start here. I think every organization should have a revenue operations full-time person. I think that's such a critical role. That person can sort of objectively be in the midst of several different operating teams and can be that glue that holds everything together. At ZoomInfo, we are very blessed to have a tremendous revenue operations org, and it's it's a fairly large org. So we are blessed with a lot of support from that team. And that's everything from systems and tech, everything related to CPQ and like operational selling, all the way to modeling, ICP analysis, TAM analysis. Mark was talking earlier about total addressable market and serviceable addressable market. Like, we have included in that revenue operations function a lot of strategy. Where are we spending time? Where are we spending resources? So like, revenue operations is critical. Like, that is the alignment piece. And in the absence of having a department or a team that does that, at least having one person whose kind of primary responsibility is to sit in the middle of these different organizations that have different operating sort of cadences day to day, that's huge.
Yeah, Zach, I agree. I think revenue operations is the keystone, right? It really, you have all these different systems that every department works out of. I look at our organization and we have, we use HubSpot and we have SalesIntel, we use TurnZero on the CS side, we have Zendesk for the support side, and all our revenue operations person is kind of puts it all together, right? And it allows us to better report, speak the same language, right? It also allows us from a segmentation perspective for our TAM and our overall strategy. And they're our go-to person, right? They're also a mediator in a lot of those situations as well, because they have to manage all of those systems. So they care about all of those systems as opposed to just one specific department, right? Or allocation of their time and efforts and energies.
I think, Chelsea, you brought up a big point there too, that the strategy piece that that part can kind of sneak under the radar. Obviously the systems and everything's operational and going vetting out new possible solutions is all in place, but the strategy piece that they can offer to the revenue engine, because they're living in that data through the course of the day, where everyone else is out doing their day jobs, to help be an advisor, I think is mission critical.
Mm-hmm.
I think we often
view it as like another, finance has always been like, what's the right phrase? Like, they've been the one holding like the marketing and sales teams accountable, right? Finance, right? But I think like RevOps, it plays that same role today, right? And they almost hold in some ways like finance accountable in a way. Like, maybe you guys can expand on this, but I just feel like there's like, the financial side of it, the metrics, but then there's like the actual in many ways, the leading indicators that generate those financial outcomes for the business. And that's basically RevOps.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Even as you're looking, especially like as you're looking at year over year, as you're looking to scale an organization, rather than saying, hey, a board, investors are telling us they want us to grow by 40% next year, being able to say, hey, here is what we're actually generating pipeline. Here is how we can bottoms up go build something, working with your RevOps organization to do exercises like that make things attainable to go build a successful engine like that. Those just tasks like that are just mission critical for success.
Zach, you were going to say something as well.
Basically, the point that Mark and Charlie just made, like, we often think of revenue operations as kind of a problem-solving organization, or we go to them when we have issues. I think there's also very much a forward-facing strategy like component to that function. That, they're going and they're building the business case to take to the board, to whatever, to say, hey, we need to increase our net headcount add by 50 through the end of the year if we're realistically going to hit this metric and that metric. So having that revenue operations almost as kind of a business intelligence function, I think is really important.
Yeah, in larger organizations, we see often where the RevOps team is closely interconnected with the BI team if the organization has that as a separate function, and pulling together siloed systems so that we can have clear, easy reporting in like Tableau or whatever tool you might be using for visualization. But an area that I see is overlooked because tech is important, systems process hugely important, data we can't argue. But what about enablement? What about content creation? Not every organization has an enablement team, right? And so how does I've grown up in an era where sales operations would lead the sales kickoff. They would lead an organized onboarding. And so from an enablement standpoint, does RevOps is that a big part of that role as well? What do you guys think?
I mean, Derrick, I've worked at organizations where enablement came from marketing, product marketing specifically, and like that kind of, they led the content creation and how we go to market, what we speak about, all of those concepts. I've also worked at organizations that sales enablement rolled right up into revenue operations, right? To your point, and kind of that strategy, and they ran the SKOs, and right now the sales enablement at SalesIntel rolls into to me, right? So I oversee all of the head of revenue teams, and the content creation is assisted by marketing, and it's assisted by product marketing, but the overall sales enablement function rolls into the revenue teams. So, I've seen it all different ways, and I think that there's benefits to each of those, right? I do think that there's some pros and cons for each of those components, and I think it's where you are in your business at the time, and the types of people that you have in the roles that are managing
the complexity
leadership
of your sales process,
Yep, that's right.
and so forth. Right. And I think exactly that enablement is when you mentioned the forward view of revenue operations, that's kind of where my head went, was how do we think about projecting people in from a development standpoint? We're taking people in as an SDR, as an example, and how do we develop them over time, mapping that strategy and getting them into an account executive position, that career tracking, and kind of overseeing that full cycle. And a lot of times people are then going into customer success from SDRs. And so having that view, that cornerstone view that the revenue operations person has, is looking at the talent funnel as well. One of the areas that Tenbound's really keen on.
I think this is super critical right now, especially as we've gone into COVID. As you think back prior to COVID, most everyone sat next to 30 of their closest friends or 100 of their closest friends for X number of years to go learn. This latest generation of young sellers that are coming in have learned over Zoom, jumping in and out of recorded calls, and had to go listen to things to go get themselves up to speed. And so enablement is more mission critical than ever, because folks are coming in so green to seeing, it's almost like getting thrown into the Indy 500 after buying your first car at the Honda dealership. Like and
people are moving around. People are moving around the organization. So how do you keep that knowledge transfer fluid?
Yep, exactly right.
Very good. Service level agreements are something that we leverage in the business for a variety of reasons, whether it's to service our customers better externally or service our internal customers better, whatever that might look like. But Zach, Chelsea, what are your views on the role of SLAs in driving revenue alignment? And actually, Mark, I would love to get your perspective on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sets a level of expectation and accountability to your internal and external, your peers, right? You have to have kind of a hard line in the sand. When you think about how you're dealing with your internal customers, from revenue operations who deal with sales and marketing professionals, right? Or if you're an SDR team, how do you engage with the prospect, and what time are you engaging and responding to them? Or if you're on the CS side, how long does it take you to respond to a support ticket, and what the expectation is setting for a customer experience, right? So it's all about how you want to go to war, right? Like how reactive you want to be, and how professional you want to be, and put these times in. And everybody on the team should be excited about those, because it's our brand. It's how we represent ourselves, right? And hold each other accountable to that, so that I know that if an email comes in my inbox, it doesn't matter who it is, I'm going to respond to it by this time, because that's what I have shared with everybody, and they hold me accountable. And creates that level of trust. It creates that level of synergy naturally, just because of that kind of line in the sand.
Yeah, and additionally, I think we can use service level agreements to sort of understand what's a showstopper and what's not a showstopper. So in an organization that's growing really fast, that's moving in a lot of directions at the same time, there's always going to be problems bubbling up from these various groups. Like there's issues with the technology, there's issues with the lead processor, and leads aren't flowing correctly or whatever. Right. We need to be able to speak the same language, to make that point again, about what is a show-stopping issue. What do we need to drop everything to fix right now? And we need to be aligned on what is the impact to revenue of these different issues. And that sort of, that determines the prioritization. So I think sharing these service level agreements across teams as well is important, because if the customer success org has a certain SLA that we're not aware of in sales, like that could impact us. Like if there's an SLA not being met, I may get a call on our 1-800 number that's somebody that's not actually a sales lead that's looking for support, but that call is going to route to one of my SDRs, and we have to then deal with that. So
leverage a cycle to take care of that.
We all have to be aligned on what those SLAs are, so that we know immediately, like, if the ball was dropped somewhere else or if the problem lies elsewhere. And having that communication, having that same language to speak is important, so that we're not like stepping on each other's toes internally.
Yeah.
I'd add that
And to build up, like,
go ahead, Mark, I'm
Derrick,
sorry. Well, I was
No,
just
go
going to add that sometimes we fall into situations where we see SLAs that are wired into the business, but maybe we don't have the corresponding reporting structure to really put eyes on whether or not we're compliant to those SLAs, approaching out of compliance with those SLAs. So as a call out, obviously, we want to make sure that we wire our systems together in a way that can really illuminate when we have SLA issues, or when we're green, of course, with SLAs, and they should be data driven as well. So, a lot of times we will put SLAs in place because that's good for us and it makes it easy for us to do business, but we want to make sure it's easy for organizations to do business with us. A little slightly different aspect there. And you take the SLA of responding to leads as an example. Zach, you mentioned lead flow. And I think we all know now that the data tells us that responding to an inbound hand raiser within 5 minutes is table stakes. You have to get there. And with ZoomInfo, in our discussion, Zach, months ago, when we did our podcast interview, you mentioned you measured it in seconds, right? And I thought that was mind shifting. And yes, there, on one hand, the SLA is going to illuminate if we have issues and problems, but it's also a peace of mind, right? Chelsea, you mentioned how professional of an organization you want to be. When I am passing, if I'm an account executive and I'm closing down a new opportunity and onboarding a new account, I can rest assured that my customer success team is going to pick up that ball and roll with it within a certain SLA. And so that gives me a peace of mind in my organization, so I can turn around and take care of getting that next account. And so I think there's two sides of that pendulum when it comes to SLAs. It really elevates the professionalism of the business, and they should also always be data-driven with a reporting structure that can really be wired together to illuminate whether we're within SLA or not. So a little bit of a rant there, but Mark, I hope I didn't steal your thought.
No. I mean, I actually slightly disagree
Okay.
with that, and some of the stuff maybe like on this like 5-minute SLA thing. So I'll give everyone like a framework that I've seen used now twice, and I really like the framework. It's fit versus intent. So we can talk about SLAs all day, blah blah blah, but like actually, how do you put this into practice? Because it's impossible to get back to everyone in 5 minutes, in my opinion. And you don't want to do that. And the buyer doesn't want to do that either. So that's just my hot take, I guess, maybe. So the way that we think about implementing SLAs in my current company and my past company is what's the fit of the account? This goes back to your idea of like TAM and SAM, but then ICP. Like, what are the dimensions that you're using to grade the pre-qualification of a business, of an account that's coming into your funnel? So like there's fit. If you haven't done that, it's like, well, okay, that's kind of like table stakes in my opinion these days, right? That's the beginning of like, what people think is ABM. And then intent is more at the buyer level. Like, what's the intent of the person, which kind of gets at to like, where are they in the journey? What signals of intent are you using? Are you using both zero party, first party, and third party data? Right, that's the holy grail. Most are probably only using first and maybe a little third party data. How fast do you process that intent? How complex is your intent algorithm? This is also sometimes known as a behavior score, right? But like intent is also important, because like when I want to follow up with someone who is like a grade B or grade C account, tier 2 or tier 3 account, and is showing low intent in 5 minutes, no, like I don't know. They probably don't want to follow up either because they have low intent. And like the account might not be a great thing for us to just pounce on at the moment. And actually, what's most important when it comes to SLA, and this is where I think marketing has to be super involved, is how you actually communicate to the buyer, the potential buyer, within that defined SLA. Like if Chelsea, you hit the nail on the head with like brand experience, and like my whole thing is brand reputation, right? Like I care as much about how the sales process is executed as our SVP of sales, Mike, does. Why? Because the entire sales process is a reputation and a
reflection.
Is the brand basically, you know what I mean? So if we're not like providing an amazing experience when it comes to what does the email say, how do you introduce yourself, it goes back to enablement and train people. Like it can be all for naught. So I think, so this is a little rant, but like I SLAs to me are like you just talk about SLAs at a surface level. They mean nothing, honestly, until you get really deep. And this goes back to aligning with the sales and CS teams, understanding the strategy, understanding your buyers, and definitely secret shop for sure. But like, it's never one-to-one, right? It's always like, it's typically a long tail. It's typically a long tail if you think about it like that, right? So I'll stop and see what other people think.
I think it's also important to have a feedback loop on those SLAs, right? Because Mark, to your point, if I get a crappy lead that comes in, I don't want to spend my time chasing that because there's other stuff out there that's better that I can chase. So having the ability to go back to the marketing team and say, hey, for X, Y, and Z reasons, like we misscored this or the intent wasn't there, like we need to constantly be looking at, you know, how we're scoring things and what we're valuing most. And that will change over time as well, right? Like what we valued a year ago as the highest priority in scoring our leads for intent and behavior and all this other stuff, it's different than it is today.
Yeah, it's art and science. I mean, this is not just, if you only look at it from a data standpoint, like my opinion is you're not thinking about SLAs correctly. Because like this is straight up like, you know, one of the things this is more maybe mature businesses, but I mean, if you could do this at any stage of your business, it really behooves you. It's like, how did that new customer now feel about that buying experience? Like, you know, you could do secret shopping, but like actually understanding the voice of the customer post sale and trying to get some level of data, could be 1 out of 2, 1 out of 3 people. That is almost more valuable than any of like what your data might tell you, because just like, you know, self-reported attribution. We implemented self-reported attribution the other week. It is completely different than what my data tells me. So it's like if you don't have both the art and the science, I think sometimes sales push back here, but like I think sales sometimes focuses too much just on the science and the numbers. But ironically, they use a lot of art when they sell a deal. It's all art, right? So
It's
I don't
funny.
know. Charlie, you say something?
Mark, you make me think about things a little differently with the SLAs. I've also played more in earlier stage startups, so I think you hit the nail on the head. To be able to have that maturity to have an advanced SLA process like you're talking about sounds like nirvana to me. To be able to have people know exactly which ones they should be targeting, who should be prioritized as inbound comes in, or even as an SDR as to what accounts they should be specifically going after. But I think it's very interesting. You're right. There's absolutely art and science in all of this. And I think the thing that's really funny to me as we're having this conversation today is over the last 10 years, I feel like RevOps has become such an important engine to the organization, because everything we're talking about, the underpinnings come from RevOps to help hold all 3 of our organizations up.
Well, that's a good segue. With 2 minutes left in our session here, Charlie, what's the best case scenario in driving revenue alignment? That's our final question. And anybody else on there that has Q&A, drop them in now or forever. We'll get your opportunity to ask any questions. We have one in there that we might get to, hopefully.
Yeah. So I'll go this quickly because I feel like we've touched on a vast majority of what I think drives revenue alignment. I think it has to start with what we've talked about with the teamwork across and hire for the strong people skills as well as that performance, like I hit on prior. Align on the metrics for compensation for all, like for churn, for example, for retention, the company ARR targets. Everyone has the exact same report card that we're all working off, the same dashboards. That's come up several times. Collaborative leadership, focusing on that customer journey. Track, and then as you go in and look at it, like in my role, to start tracking leads through the entire funnel. So metrics on each stage through the funnel, each segment, each channel, the average deal size, all of that we're reporting on, and where RevOps helps us is to really go at LeadIQ to go and understand where things may be breaking, so that we're forever tuning, as they call me a boomer now at LeadIQ, the carburetor. That no one has a carburetor now, and this generation doesn't even know what a carburetor is anymore because they're not on any vehicles. But to tune the carburetor, to know where to go and adjust, I think is mission critical, and that plays right into what I was saying prior with the RevOps piece helping.
Very good. Very good. Well, thank you very much to all that have attended our session here. We're at time. Thank you to all our panelists. Next up, session 2 is Data is the New Oil, using customer to customer data to drive revenue alignment. Apologies there. Thank you for attending. We'll see you very, very soon.